Hey guys, welcome to this video. My name is John Watts. I'm a consumer protection attorney in the state of Alabama. And what we'll talk about in this video is emotional distress damages under the FDCPA. That's the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So, first of all, what types of damages can you get with an FDCPA claim? That's where you're suing an abusive debt collector. You can get statutory damages. That's up to $1,000. And that's even if you weren't hurt. That's just to encourage you to sue debt collectors that break the law. But the major part of damages under the FDCPA is what's called actual or compensatory damages. And when we think of those, we usually divide them into two parts. We divide them into economic damages, and we'll talk about that in another video. But what I want to focus on is emotional distress damages. Sometimes this is called mental anguish, emotional distress, all different ways to describe it. What it's talking about is the emotions, the feelings, the effect that this has on us when we're dealing with an abusive debt collector. So let me give you an example. So I'm recording this on May 20th. We are still in this pandemic. States are starting to reopen, but we're certainly not back to normal by any means. But let's imagine that tomorrow night you had just a fantastic night planned with your spouse. You're finally going to go out, go to this nice restaurant, whatever you're going to do. And right before you leave, you get a phone call from a debt collector, and they are harassing you, and they're cussing you out, and they're lying to you, and all these things. How would you feel after that? Or imagine instead of the debt collector calling you, you answer the phone, it's your mother-in-law. And she says, hey, so-and-so just called. I know you're not paying your debts. I always knew my son, my daughter, never should have married you. You're a bum, okay? All that sort of stuff. Now, do you still want to go out? Probably not. Well, have you physically been injured? Well, no, we're not talking about a physical injury, but emotionally you've been injured. Mentally you've been injured. And so how can that manifest itself? Well, it might be your heart's pounding. It might be blood pressure. It might be your stomach is upset. It might be you have this just terrible headache. It might be all you can do is replay this conversation in your mind over and over and over and over. And you just become upset as that happens. And so you might say, you know what, I don't feel like going out. Or I can't eat, my stomach is so upset. Or, I'm just not going to enjoy this at all because I'm just thinking about what this debt collector said to me. Maybe they told you they're calling your boss tomorrow morning. Maybe they said they're contacting your payroll department to say, go ahead and start garnishment, even though they don't have a judgment against you, even though they have no right to garnish your wages. Maybe they told you that you're being sued, okay? And it turns out you're not being sued. Maybe they have threatened you with arrest. Say, hey, the sheriff's going to come by and arrest you because you've committed bank fraud by not paying off your credit card. Whatever it is, okay? So we can have these feelings and these physical effects. So again, upset stomach, pounding heart, blood pressure, headache. Sometimes when we're really stressed, maybe our back starts to hurt us. So you can have those, and then it can also just be the mental or the emotional side. And so the question is, can you recover from an abusive debt collector who violates the FDCPA if it's caused you emotional distress? And I can tell you the answer in Alabama is absolutely yes. I think in most states, in most federal courts and jurisdictions, that you can do that. But you have to check, of course, your local rules if you're not in the state of Alabama. But what we have to show is that it's more than just kind of, well, that was annoying. Or, that slightly bugged me. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be upsetting. Okay? So you think about, you can get news that's just devastating to you. Maybe you've been laid off. Or maybe you find out a family member has suddenly died unexpectedly. Well, that would have, you don't just say, well, that's too bad. It really deeply affects you. That's what we're talking about here. So are there other things in life that deeply affect? Absolutely. Okay. Again, job loss, loss of life, other things like that. But if a debt collector has violated the law, okay, so imagine here's the line, and they come right up to the line, but they don't cross the line. Well, then that's fine. Okay, they didn't violate the law, so we can't sue them for emotional distress. But when they go over that line, now any emotional distress that they've caused us by going over the line, then that's a problem for them. And we get to show that to the jury to be able to recover damages. So how do you do that? Well, give you a couple things. One, be as specific as possible. So let me give you an example. If you and I see each other on the street and you say, "Hey John, how are you doing?" I go, "Oh, it's just terrible. Just going through terrible times." Now let me ask you this. You might be very sympathetic. You might say, "Oh, I'm so very sorry." But honestly, do you know what I'm going through when I say, "Yeah, it's just been really tough"? I don't think you do. Okay, you have no idea because you don't know what the details are. So, if you ask me the details and I say, "Well, my dog ran away, my wife left me, I had 4 flat tires, my house burned down, the doctor called me with the terrible diagnosis," you're like, "Oh my goodness, this is, it is terrible what you're going through." But what if I said, "Oh yeah, it's just terrible, I had an 8-week trip planned to the Caribbean and I'm only going to be able to go for 7 weeks." I mean, just imagine that. You'd be going, you got no problems, okay? So when we're kind of general and we just say, "Well, that was tough," or "Boy, that call bothered me," we don't really know what that means. The jury doesn't know what that means. So you can think of it this way. You have a tabletop, okay? Tabletop is, "That was very upsetting. It really bothered me. It caused me all sorts of mental anguish," okay? But if there are no legs under that tabletop, what happened? Boom, it just falls. So what we want to do is we want to start putting some legs under that tabletop. Well, what are the legs? The legs are specific events. So you say, "Boy, that was really tough what that debt collector did." Just imagine somebody saying, "Well, how so?" You go, "Well, I got that call at 6 in the morning where they were threatening to, wipe out my bank account, take my stimulus check. I've never heard of these people. They haven't sued me. I don't know them from Adam." Well, what did that do? I couldn't go back to sleep. And I was supposed to do something with my kids this morning. I was so upset. I was so stressed. I've been 5 hours on the internet researching this, calling everybody, trying to, get somebody at my bank to tell me that they will not allow this to happen. And it just ruined my whole day. Well, see, now we're starting to get a picture. There's a picture being painted of what happened. We go, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I see how that'd be upsetting. I see how that did upset you." Well, what else? Well, then, I get a bill from my doctor. And I'm like, do I pay it? Do I not pay it? I don't want the check to bounce because maybe they're wiping out my bank account, that debt collector that called me. Like, oh, okay. So what are we doing? We're building legs under that table. So now that table is solid because it's got all these legs under it. Okay. And so as many specific details as you can come up with that are truthful, don't exaggerate, but don't minimize it either. When somebody says, "How are you doing?" You're like, "Oh, I'm doing okay." Well, maybe you're not doing okay. This isn't the time for that. We don't exaggerate, but we don't minimize. Just right down the middle, 100% truthful. Well, what else can we do? So we can be specific. If there are other people that can testify that they observed this, we may think we're sort of hiding it well, "Hey, look, I'm not going to burden other people." But maybe our spouse says, "I could tell every time he had a phone call with that collector because his whole demeanor changed. He became short with the kids. He wouldn't really talk to me. He didn't want to eat." I mean, whatever it is. See, now that's starting to be somebody else that's observing you, and they can tell the jury what's happened. Well, maybe you have coworkers that can say that. Maybe you have other family members that can say that. So when we can be specific and we can show other people that they were able to observe what happened. Now, again, that starts to paint this picture where the jury who doesn't know you and you're asking them to believe you, well, the more details you can give them, that starts to fill in the picture. If there are other people that are involved, that fills in the picture. So now the jury can look back at that and go, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that." And we don't ask them to do this. It's just human nature. The jury goes, "Well, I can put myself in that position. I can understand," because they'll think back to other references. "Oh, well, I remember when I got fired. here's how I acted, or I remember when I got this bad news, or this happened. And so this plaintiff, this consumer who's suing, the picture of what they painted is consistent with what I, the juror, have experienced and what I have observed. And the jury is told in the jury charge, look, there is no legal yardstick for measuring emotional distress or mental anguish damages. We tell the jury, the judge tells the jury, use your common sense, use your experience. And so if we're in state court, we have 12 jurors. If we're in federal court, we have 6 jurors. All of them are to get together, use their common experience, and then evaluate, was there sufficient evidence of mental anguish and emotional distress? And if there was, what's the dollar amount? Because here's the whole concept with compensatory damage, whether we're talking about economic damages, emotional damages. So this is how you were right before the debt collector did the bad thing to you. Then afterwards, you were down here. Well, what do they owe you? They owe you the amount of money to get you back to where you were. So sometimes we have debt collectors say, well, John, we abused your client, but your client had some, they were going through some tough times, so we don't have to pay anything. No, maybe this is us at perfect level. This is us in reality. Well, if they brought us down to here, that's what they owe us for. Not all the way to perfect, but they owe us for what we have. In the personal injury world, which is a world I've lived in for 25 years, we call this, you take your plaintiff as you find them, okay? The idea that you can't run a red light, smash into somebody who's 70 years old, you break their legs and their neck is messed up, and you say, well, if you were an offensive lineman for Alabama, or if you were a defensive lineman for Auburn, you would have been fine. Well, you know what the answer is? Why don't you run into a lineman instead of a 70-year-old guy? You take your plaintiff as you find them. So if your plaintiff, the person that's injured, has some underlying conditions and you make those worse, well, then you're responsible for it. It's a common thread throughout tort law. So think car wrecks, train wrecks, that type of thing. And consumer litigation, where we're suing for credit reports, or what we're talking about here, suing abusive debt collectors. So keep these thoughts in mind. And if you can write stuff down, if you have a lawyer, obviously talk to your lawyer. But if you don't have a lawyer, and you'll be consistent about writing down how this has affected you. Maybe you go to a therapist. Maybe you go to a doctor. Maybe you go to a counselor. And you talk to them about this. And they make notes. Well, that can be very helpful. Because then if we're representing you, for example, we get a copy of those medical records and say, look, we talked to our primary care physician about it. We talked to our therapist about it. Now, it does, whenever you make a claim of emotional distress, you have to assume, it's not always true, but you have to assume your medical records, your therapy notes, all those things are opened up to the other side. It doesn't mean the jury gets to hear all that, but it means the other side gets to see it. You know what? So what? They get to see it. If a truck runs a red light and hits me, guess what? All my medical records are opened up if I make a claim. What's the alternative? Don't make a claim? No, I'm not going to let somebody run a red light, break my legs, and then they don't have to pay anything for that. Same thing with an abusive debt collector. Make them pay. Understand your records may be opened up, but that's okay. Because you're a real person. The jury will see you're a real person. They're real people too, okay? And so you can think about specific, you can think about other people that can testify to this. You can think about, have you talked to any counselors, therapists, maybe your preacher, your priest, whoever it might be, anybody that could provide some corroborating evidence, okay? And so I hope that all that's helpful for you. If you're dealing with an abusive debt collector, certainly, get with a lawyer in your state, okay? If you live outside of Alabama and you need help finding a lawyer in your state, just reach out to me. Or if it's a national company that's abusing you and you say, hey, I want to talk to you, John, about filing suit in Alabama against that national company, I'm certainly happy to talk with you about that. But our first recommendation is always get with the lawyer in your state. So if we can help you in any way, it's 205-879-2447 or alabamaconsumer.com. Thanks for watching this video. And if you like these type of videos, if you haven't already subscribed, should be a subscribe button, I don't know, somewhere around here under the video, on the video, little red button. Just feel free to subscribe to it and share it with anybody that you think this might be useful for. And always feel free to put comments. And thanks a lot. Catch you in the next video. All right, bye-bye.